Yeah, great. Okay, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Morning here in Australia, Melbourne, Australia. Um, Welcome to this event about it's a repurposed event, hence the title about squeezing more juice from your RFX responses. But essentially, it is about winning more RFX. And when I talk about RFX, for me, RFX is all of the RF things, RFQ, RFP, RFT. So I collectively refer to it as RFX. It might be a little bit strange for you to see me here in front of you because I'm really focused on the IT professional services sector. And I know that you come from a range of different industries and market sectors, but I do have a particular interest in RFX as part of my career, working in various prominent IT services organizations, and I formed an opinion and an approach which I discussed with Dan, and we felt that maybe it would be useful, even though most of the people here today, I assume, are in the SMB sector. It may be useful to have a look at the common challenges that other people are facing and why they're facing them, and then potentially have a look at what may be a potential solution. So I am going to try and wrap up these slides within the half hour. So I'll go through them fairly quickly. I hope that's okay. But really where we want to get to is that broad understanding of what the common challenges are and what we can do about it. And if I'm really more of a Microsoft guy than a Google Meet guy, but I assume there is a thumbs up or something available for you to do some reactions. So rather than take up time and run polls and wait for all that to happen, if you just want to hit the thumbs up, if you feel that this resonates for you, that would be a really good way to take the pulse as we go through. I'm going to use as a subject matter kind of expertise for this. I'm going to base my proposition, if you like, on a report produced by a company called Loopio. Loopio is an RFP software company, and I am aligned with them in the sense that I'm an a Loopio solutions partner. But really, I think I'm using this because I've used this in previous events. It's, I think, the most authoritative study of RFP trends and benchmarks that there is available. So just from that perspective alone, I would recommend going to loopio.com and finding this this report and having a look, because I've only really skimmed the surface here. But what I'm basing this presentation on is a couple of key facts, and actually maybe just one key fact and two key facts, in fact. One of them is that 40%, according to that survey of about 1,600 people, and this has been running for several years, about 40% of revenue comes from RFX in the SMB sector. And that's something, that if you feel resonates for you, then I'd really like to see those thumbs up. So I think that means that it's worth focusing on doing it well and looking at common problems and possible solutions. And at the end, we've got something interesting to show you or discuss with you and see how that might happen. So let's press on with a few key insights based on that report. So if we take the perspective that RFX is critical, but winning is hard, that's really the situation that we find ourselves in. 40% of SMB revenue comes from RFX, and you can see there that there's a range of different industries represented in the report. You will get a copy of this deck, and of course you can look at the report yourself. So I won't spend much time going into who gets most of their RFP or revenue from RFPs, but you can see that it is significant across many industries. The problem is, though, and this is the second key point, is that the win rate, and particularly in SMB, is not great. It's not actually great anywhere else either. The enterprise organizations that I've worked in aren't doing a huge amount better, but they are doing a bit better. And you can see here the win and advancement rates, and advancement is shortlist, varies by industry. But I think in some ways advancement or shortlist is ultimately, is a really significant metric to track. And because once you've been shortlisted, then you're in to the next step of the process, and it's all about spreading the love and the secret sauce. So I think if you turn that around, we're looking at a high loss rate of potentially around 60%, and that is something that, given that if we agree that a chunk of our revenue, whatever it is, whether it's 40% or not, is at stake, then it seems to me that whatever we can do to improve that is worth a look. The reasons for loss are typically price of our solution, our competitors were better, or maybe they're incumbent already with the organization putting out the tender, or the product didn't meet the customer needs, or the quality just wasn't there. And interestingly, the reasons for losing vary by roles. So associates and the SMEs, if you like, in the process are more likely to blame price, whereas directors and C-level company owners, that kind of thing, are more likely to say our product or service didn't meet the customer's needs. Whatever it is, whatever your situation is, you'll know why you think you lose most bids. So the complication really is that, to be good at RFX, we need resources, and resources are expensive, and therefore they are scarce. The top challenges that the report identifies are really quite interesting. The top one, and it has been the top one for a number of years, is collaborating with SMEs. And they don't mean that SMEs are difficult. What they mean is that getting people's availability is difficult, because SMEs are obviously billable most of the time, and yet there is also a reluctance, which I personally have seen many times, a reluctance by SMEs to be involved in this process. It's not the most exciting process, but it is intricate and complex at times. And if they're not enabled to fulfill their part in that effectively, then they will be reluctant and they'll be ineffective. So what I've done here is I've listed on the right a number of categories or areas where I think the solution to all of this can be found. And from a people perspective, it's their enablement, being able to respond in an effective way, which makes them feel like they're actually achieving something, that there's a point to this, and that they can contribute in a meaningful way, and obviously their availability. From a process point of view, processes are often organic and they're applied loosely, and those need to be defined better and applied better. Information obviously is at the heart of all of this, and being able to find that and being able to find reliable, authoritative information is critical. And the key to that may be technology, if we use it, if it's appropriate for what we're trying to use. It's not a hammer, it's a screwdriver, and it's accessible to the people that need to use it. So you can see there those top challenges. I'll leave you to consider which ones of those apply specifically to you, but that's really the top 10. And we're going to be looking at all of these in a bit more detail over the next 15 minutes. It's often said that to improve something, you must measure it, but it's surprising how much data isn't being collected to inform improvements. And some of this information, like cost per bid, is critical. I mean, after all, how can we make an informed decision to bid if we don't know how much it actually costs? And how do we know where our weak points are if we don't look at performance or section scores? And how do we know if our process is any good if we don't measure team sentiment? So if there's one thing we could start doing today for free, it's capturing more data as we go through, whether it's in a spreadsheet or whatever. It's essential to get beyond just, how many did we bid for and how many did we win, which, as you can see, there are the top two metrics there. Everything else seems to fall off a cliff after those top three. So drilling down into these categories of people, process, information, and technology, these components of what I call the ideal state. What we can see here is that there's a trend in proposal ownership, which is sadly going in the wrong direction. It did peak last year and built up to last year, but since then there's been a significant drop off. And it's a resourcing thing, I guess, but also an expertise thing. And what we're finding now is that although ownership of the RFP process is often dedicated or held by a dedicated proposal manager or team, more often than not, it's a mix of proposal and sales team members, which is fine, but this will lead to conflicts of interest and time, as we'll see. So what I'd like to do now very quickly is to go through each of those categories that we've just looked at, or those challenges that we've just looked at, and break them down by those solution categories of people, process, information, and technology. And I'm just going to map them to, what I think are the key aspects of each of those categories. And I think you can see straight away that it's easy to map a lot of these challenges to people availability and people enablement and people support. I won't go through them in huge detail, but what you can see there is that collaborating with SMEs is the biggest problem, and finding up-to-date and accurate answers really comes down to people's availability and their ability to use the tools, or in the absence of tools, whatever you do have, to be able to find that information and put it in a presentable form. From a process point of view, it's less specific. The challenges are less specific, or the challenges that have been identified, but still, collaborating with SMEs is all about process. Well, not all about process, but primarily about enablement and process, being able to get them in, get their answers, get their contributions in an effective and optimized way. And it also means that process is what gives us the bandwidth to answer multiple RFPs and to be able to decide, for example, which ones we're going to bid on and which priorities we're going to apply to it. So process is kind of, it's when it comes down to an organic people writing stuff in a response form, it's a more high-level consideration, but it's still a critical one. Information challenges are primarily about being able to find or develop reliable, authoritative answers. So finding them is the needle in the haystack situation, and developing them, developing reliable and authoritative answers requires subject matter knowledge, and keeping them current is both process and an information problem. Obviously, tech will help with this, and we'll have a look at this in a moment, but let's have a look at these two, finding up-to-date, accurate answers and choosing the best answer from a group, just to understand the impact of process and people on these. Because the amount of time that proposal managers spend on things that are not directly aligned with proposal response and proposal management is significant. And in fact, this one, 67% of proposal managers say that they spend at least part of their time providing sales teams with ad hoc answers. And what that suggests to me is that the sales teams aren't enabled to be able to find that information themselves. So maybe that information doesn't exist in a clear, authoritative, and findable manner. and maybe they don't have the tools or the process, they don't know how to find that information. So you can see right there that that is a huge red warning for anyone really relating to people, process, and information and technology. So from a tools and a tech point of view, then obviously, a lot of this relates to having the appropriate technology and making it accessible to the people that need to use it, because it obviously is going to be a key enabler. And we're going to take a deeper look at that right now. I know that a lot of you are keen to understand what you can do with ChatGPT, and I imagine some of you are already using ChatGPT, because the number of respondents in this report who are using ChatGPT or something like that has rocketed over the last year, not surprisingly. Also not surprisingly is that the use cases for the scenarios are fairly predictable for generative AI, editing, creating answers, writing drafts, that kind of thing. So absolutely, it's useful. Is it a magic bullet? Well, the report notes that consumer tools like ChatGPT and Claude and so on, or more consumer-oriented, you need to consider the privacy consideration of these, because the data that is entered into and generated by those is often used to train the model. So you don't want your secret source ending up in the public domain. Business tools like Microsoft Copilot are better in that respect, but these are general purpose AI tools, the hammer versus the screwdriver. And that means obviously that you've got to put in the time and effort to be able to make it do what you want it to do reliably, and train it so that it knows what good looks like. And obviously your people will then need to know when they see something generated by an AI tool that it is good. And I think this is where the value of purpose-built tech starts to become evident in being more appropriate for the task at hand. RFP software, of which Loopio is just one example, is obviously purpose-built for the job, and 65% of respondents report using it. So that is also a significant leap from previous survey years. And they're using it for a much broader range of tasks than we saw on the previous slide, than just simply content generation. In fact, as you can see here, the tasks encompass people, process, and information. And they directly address many of the top challenges we've just been looking at. So there are huge benefits there, and the benefits are even greater with a tool designed for the job. Obvious, sounds obvious. And that those benefits are across all categories of the ideal state. Most software users report that they are happier with their process as a result of using the software than the non-RFP software users. I put that in there really to indicate that there's a fair disparity there, and when we look at those things that we are or are not measuring, or perhaps should be measuring, team sentiment and satisfaction with process is one of those things that I think most people just don't really monitor and don't keep an eye on. So they're unaware of the wrinkles and problems in their process. In terms of what people wanted to do or plan to do to win more RFX, there's a bunch of recommendations. And again, these neatly break down into those four categories, the ideal state or solution categories of people, process, information, and technology. In fact, nearly all of them map to somewhere in that process. So my point here is really that it's not all about tech. It can never all be about tech. ChatGPT is wonderful, but it's just a tool, and it may not even be, the most appropriate tool. It's primarily about people, process, and information. Whether you had spreadsheets or ChatGPT, that's a tech backend. It really comes down to how you're using that. So, and we're getting to the pointy bit here right now. So, if the solution is people, process, information, and technology, then the answer or the question arising probably for you in your mind is how. And I'm suggesting and have suggested that the ideal state, or happy state, if you like, comprises enabled and available people, that you've got a well-defined process that is applied and they can follow it because they know what it is and it's simple enough to follow, that they have access to information readily available to them, which is reliable and authoritative, or can be developed in the moment as reliable and authoritative, and they know that that is the case, and that the technology is appropriate for the job and is accessible and available to them. So that's, you know, what I'm summarizing here is what I think the ideal state is. And to be perfectly honest with you, even though I've worked in, you know, organizations of 300,000 people with turnovers of 30 billion euros, I haven't seen anyone nail this. But I have seen, you know, different organizations getting closer in different respects. So here's where I really wanted to get to. I can't here today tell you how to get to that ideal state. That's a much bigger discussion. I'm very willing to have that for you. But it is a discussion that Dan and I have had. And Dan is keen to look at the bigger picture and is interested in exploring that with you, as am I. So here's really what we would like to ask. What if the future looked something like this? And I say something like this because this is, you know, hardly even back of napkin at the moment. This is really a concept that we're looking to float with members, the consortium members, and see what they think. But what if it looked like this, in which some things in that ideal state can be done for you. Some of them can be done with you, and some of them you do by yourself or on your own. And to break that down a little bit more, what if there was a technology platform, RFP software in the cloud, provided for you? And what if there was expertise in terms of bid management to help you define those processes and respond to bids collaboratively as part of the consortium, or even individually as a member? That's all TBC. But, you know, not many organizations can afford a full-time expert bid manager. So maybe, you know, a fractional bid manager provided by the consortium or something like that, a team even, might be possible. Process management is something that really you need to own, but can be done with you as well. And that will be partly enabled by those previous two things. Content management probably is going to be your domain. It's your information, it's your documentation, it's your secret sauce. So you need to manage that. But help can be provided in terms of how you would do that. My background is information management, for example. And then answer management is, you know, really, this is the pointy end of the whole process. We've got the RFP, we've got 10 days to respond, or whatever it is, and we need to get the best answers fast, and they need to be authoritative and reliable. How do we do that? And it comes down to those previous steps, having the people, process, information, and technology lined up so that our experts can go, that's the answer I need, or create the answer for me and I know what good looks like. So that is almost the half hour. I've got one more slide, which is really this, next steps. If you're interested in looking at how you can get closer to that ideal state, from my perspective, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn and get in touch to discuss specific challenges and needs, or just to have a chat. But also, like I mentioned at the start, NZBCA is planning to send out a survey relating to that proposition, or, you know, blue sky thinking that I just mentioned, to gauge what people's interest is to that. So look out for that. Please provide the feedback to Dan. I know that he's obviously dependent on that to provide the services and support that the consortium needs. And that's it from me. Bang on the half hour, Dan. I'm very pleased with myself.
Perfect for half an hour.
I did race through it.
We can stop the video right now and people can watch it.